And also, a wonderful round of applause to the QueensLink team. All of us here have done an incredible job at making this event happen. So thank you so much.
Is this on?
All right, we're going to jump right into it. We have 5 esteemed panelists right over here. Why don't we go around and do a round of introductions? So, Professor Goldwyn, would you like to start?
My name is Eric. I'm a professor at NYU, and I study the cost drivers of transit projects. You can't hear me? How about, is that better? No?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Reintroduce, please. I didn't hear it.
My name is Eric Goldwyn. I'm a professor at New York University. I study the cost drivers of transit projects.
Sorry, Professor Goldwyn is also one of the key members in the Transit Costs Project. I assume, as the nerds everyone here is, a lot of you probably know about that, so that's a very important piece of research that you're doing there.
Very important.
All right.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jared. A lot of you may know me from my social media content Transit Talks. I'm also academically an urban planner and a transportation planner by profession.
I'm Hayden Clarkin. I'm a transportation engineer and planner. I go by the Transit Guy online. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Sorry, it's a mantle, by the way.
Hi everyone, my name is Michael. You might know me from TikTok as Schoolhouse Cock.
We can say that here. That's
We
okay.
can say that. It's not spelled like that. My background is in mechanical engineering, and that led me to becoming involved with QueensLink by accident. And here we are a year and a half later doing amazing things. So I'm glad to be here.
My name is Andrew Lynch, but I think a lot more people know me as Van Schnookenregen online through my track maps and my blogging. And I'm also the co-founder of the QueensLink project. So personally, I just want to say thank you for everyone who's being here. Thank you for Noelle for putting this together. Thank you to the whole team, because it's not just her, but she is. Before we begin, I just want to say, the reason that we're all sitting here is because Noelle heard about a grant and ran with it. And this entire thing is her baby. We wouldn't be in this room without her. So I just want to, everyone put a round of applause for Noelle.
All right, thank you so much. You're too kind. Thank you. So first off, this is a really difficult question. I'm so sorry for giving it to you first. Why do you support QueensLink?
I support QueensLink because I came up with the name. So there's actually someone tonight who's not here. His name's Rick Horan. He's not here because he, can you turn that down? He broke his ankle in a bike accident a couple weeks ago. But he's actually the reason that any of us are here, because he had started Queens Rail Corporation back in 2015 with the goal of doing something to reactivate this abandoned rail line. He's from Rockaway, Queens himself. And so he just thought it was a waste of city resources to not do anything with this. I had written about it just sort of as a blogger, as someone who liked transit but didn't really do anything more than writing and making maps. And he reached out to me and he said, this is a great idea. If we could do both together, do you want to maybe explore this and develop this as a concept? And I thought, that's crazy. Sure, what else am I doing? And that's how QueensLink started. So I support it because it's a great idea, but more importantly, I've seen the response that we've gotten to this idea. I have come up with a ton of crazy ideas and nobody talks to me about them. QueensLink, people recognize me for my work on QueensLink, and to see the gestation and to see how this has grown over the last few years, I'm beyond words. So it's not just that I support QueensLink because it's a good idea. I support it because the people of Queens think it's a good idea.
Yes!
So my background kind of informs my perspective on this, and I focus a lot in historic research. And so the way I became involved with QueensLink is by researching other projects and seeing how resources like right-of-ways and rail infrastructure can be wasted so easily by, just like any urban project that takes over a space. And so it's really important to consider the value of the resources that you're working with and the limited quantity you have, especially in a city like New York. And as someone that lives in New York, I became concerned with it. And so that's how I ended up researching into QueensLink. I became familiar with QueensLink, and it became crucially important because I recognize that it's a project, thanks to the work of the entire QueensLink team, that has tangible action associated with it. And it has boxes that everyday people, you and I, can help check, like coming to this event, like showing up in person, like participating in community board meetings and fundraising. Like, these are all things that are not available to every transit project that is taking place. And so this is a really special project, and it's something that could legitimately happen. And that's why QueensLink is so important to me.
I'm going to make this really short and sweet. I think in a time where, Eric has pointed out how we can't build anything. Second Avenue subway costing a ridiculous amount of money per mile. The idea that we would just like let a already elevated rail right of way go instead of like serving a community as dense as the city of Chicago is just kind of crazy malpractice if you think about it on its head. And also we just need more north-south rail links, and so it just makes sense. It would be stupid to get rid of it. So just on the head of there.
I support QueensLink because this city would have not become the city that we love today without its rail infrastructure. We were the forefront on a world scale of what it means to have a metropolis. And when you think about it, historically speaking, QueensLink is already halfway done. We have the southern half of that abandoned line that was captured by the city in the 50s, and there were always proposals to continue that north towards Queens Boulevard. And like others have now said on the stage, it's there already. We have a unique opportunity here to finish the job that was started and keep to that promise of this city being a transit city. And I think that QueensLink encompasses that in so many fashions. So that's why I support it.
I'll give a little bit of a more personal anecdote. So Andrew has bothered me about QueensLink for many years. I didn't really know what it was. And he was like, well, what do you think about this? Can you help me with this? And I was like, let me look at it a little bit. I read a lot of his stuff. And I was like, oh, this is actually pretty good. I think as someone who studies transit stuff, when you see a bus that has 30,000, 40,000 people a day, you think the logical upgrade is a subway. And when you see that it's connecting and making a connection that is, a mile apart or whatever it is, it just seems like this is a pretty logical thing to explore. Now, as Hayden mentioned, I do care about costs. I think the real reason why I focus on that and why we focus on it at NYU is that Second Avenue Phase 1 is like a tremendously amazing project. It moved 200,000 people per day. Even if you paid double what you paid, it's still on a per rider basis a great project. But the problem with the cost increases is that projects that are less good in terms of total ridership just don't get considered. They don't get their fair sort of assessment. And I think QueensLink is a project that has sort of, if we had more reasonable costs, we're just like, yeah, of course, let's do this, because as has been mentioned, it's partially done. All we have to do is sort of finish the job. So for all those reasons, I think it's a very interesting project. And also the grassroots effort is amazing. As Michael was saying, I think a big part of politics is just showing up, and you guys are doing that, and that's awesome.
I just want to say, I'm so glad that none of you do not support Queens. Like, are any of you Queens Way supporters by any chance? I think that's how the borough of Queens and the city as a whole feels about the Queens Way. All right, this next question, we got quite a few times in one way or another. I'm sorry, I had to pick one of these, but it is, how does the current administration change affect the viability of QueensLink?
Can people in Queens have a lot more babies? Because apparently birth rates are now going to be how we fund transit projects. So if new families want to move into Red Hook and Utica Ave, I don't know. But in all seriousness, I think what we were just bringing up on is like, there's going to have to be more of a state share, unfortunately, with transit projects, given that the federal share might not be there for the next 4 years. And so using existing right-of-ways, these costs, like I know it sounds like an austerity thing to bring up costs, but like when the difference is, less than $1 billion is what the state needs to fill versus multiple billions, that calculation gets a lot harder politically and whatnot. And so I think us trying to be as fiscally prudent by using an existing right-of-way, connecting to existing subway service, really kind of helps like make the point, as well as, obviously like density changes in order to kind of like prop up the value capture being, if property values increase by new transit lines, you get more revenue from property taxes, which can then pay to keep expanding transit. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I mean, it seems like every week things are changing, so I think we have to wait a little longer to figure out kind of what the next 4 years looks like, unfortunately.
So I'm gonna make eye contact with everyone in this room when I say this. So I don't know what the reality is gonna hold for the next 4 years, but I want us to be realistic. This is gonna require the claws to dig in. And I have a terrible attention span. I do, it's bad. And I know a lot of people in this room probably don't have the best one, but you need to understand that this is a long-term project. This requires long-term support. This is not something that just ends 4 years from now or is going to happen tomorrow. This is a process that has been long in the making and will continue to be long. And so having this energy is really important. Having these events are really important. Understanding that in-person involvement is important is crucial. And it's for the long game. Like, this is something that will have to continue probably past 4 years from now in order for this to happen. And so everyone stay clocked in or else.
And keep showing up.
Yes.
Thank you for showing up here.
Very, very small point to add to Michael's thoughts is that so long as there is one person who wants it, they can never say that nobody wants it, which is a big thing that politicians try to use. It's like, nobody wants this. This needs to be something else. We are proof that that is a fallacy.
All right, we can move on to our next question. So, if opening day for QueensLink were tomorrow, what would be the next community-led rail expansion or service improvement in New York City that advocates should focus on? I think Hayden has one.
I was just going to say Red Hook. I think Red Hook really needs a lot more transit. Last week I went to Segregation by Design's documentary about the VQE and how much it destroyed the neighborhood, the connectivity, the vibrancy, all of the buzzwords, I guess, us urbanists and transit advocates use. Having to walk almost, it was like the documentary was like a block away from IKEA. And it was 10 o'clock at night when I had to come back. And I was like, wow, this is actually really crazy that it's this bad. I live off the 7 line, so I'm spoiled when it comes to transit. So that would be mine. But I mean, there's a bunch, like Utica Ave, name it, Eastern Queens. Yeah. Staten Island, maybe.
I think hypothetically, if it opened tomorrow, the beauty is our minds are so full of amazing thoughts of what else the city could bring. And I think the opportunities can be almost endless. Things that come to mind for me are the dire need for a cross Bronx subway, when you look at the best way to look at where the next places to look are where we have bus rapid transit-esque lines, select bus service lines. This is kind of like the MTA's way of saying, we know this is a high priority corridor, so here's this bus, because we can't do much else right now. So Fordham Road comes to mind, Utica Avenue, Nostrand Avenue, extending further into Queens. 179th Street Terminal is not meant to be a terminal based off the amount of tracks out there. So those come to mind for me.
In working on this project, I've gotten a much more deeper appreciation of how hard it is to build anything, not just in New York, but just period. It's just extra hard in New York. And so what gives me hope is the only other sort of transit-related issue, idea, concept that's out there that has any type of people who are pushing for it is regional rail. I think we owe it to ourselves to rethink about how we use the rails that we have first. There are very few right-of-ways like QueensLink, like the Rockaway Beach Branch or the Bay Ridge Line, which is proposed to be part of the IBX. Once we, let's just say best case scenario, we get those built tomorrow. Then things start to get hard because digging fresh right-of-ways is going to be expensive, period. It doesn't matter, what country we're in, it's expensive. So the idea that we have these existing commuter rail lines that aren't living up to their potential, that run through neighborhoods, that don't serve communities, that have higher proportion of transit riders, is, a problem. And so there are a lot more, let's say, little details that I think regional rail advocates aren't being honest about, or maybe they just don't know about it. But there's a larger picture of having the state work with New Jersey or Connecticut to sort of fix this problem on a regional level. Beyond that, and that project's not going to be cheap either. But the benefits are going to be so much more widespread than just one corridor in Queens or Brooklyn or wherever. Woo!
Did you want to answer that? Or?
No, those are all very good.
Perfect. All right. So, I don't know how much you guys know about this, but this was just such a good question. I have to ask it here. Has the recent fundraising success with QueensLink here changed the perception of grassroots transit out in Albany, or maybe like out in the country as a whole? We all know QueensLink is more than just transit walks.
All right. I guess I got to take that. Well, I think it's telling that there are, I don't think anyone from any elected official's office is here tonight. We had one person reach out from the Public Advocate's office. Currently, Public Advocate Jemani Williams is working on a policy paper outlining the pros and cons of congestion pricing. Not the cons being like we shouldn't have it, but like what more could we be doing? And QueensLink is going to be part of that. That report hopefully comes out within the next month. What I still think that there are too many people on the fence. We've seen that in polls that have been done where politicians have asked their constituents what they feel about Queensway or QueensLink or nothing. And the overwhelming response is we need better transit, and you don't hear anything from them. I think where we are right now, all of our elected leaders need to know about this energy, about everyone in this room, how they feel. The outpouring we got last year when we did our letter writing campaign for funding for an EIS in the state budget, that was wild. 100,000 letters we sent, something like that. There needs to be more advocacy, unfortunately, but just seeing how it's built over the years has given me a lot of hope. Elections have consequences, as we have found out the hard way, and elections will have consequences. So as a member of the QueensLink, I can't really speak to the mayoral election, but do your research, figure out who supports us and who doesn't, and vote accordingly.
Sorry, I just want to say, as well, one of the most frequent answers that we get from politicians when we ask, what do you think of QueensLink and Queensway? What do you think of that? They say, oh, I support both. And we very much appreciate the support in any way possible. But as you all know, QueensLink is the both option. Do we have any other?
That was good.
Perfect. All right. So kind of building off of that, are there any other places that New York City should be taking inspiration from, maybe in terms of transit costs? Because as we all know, the United States is terrible at building transit, especially right now. So, but are there any cities that are actually doing it good, doing it well?
So I think, for this specific project, right, there's this short tunnel. And short tunnels, for those that don't know, are challenging because the sort of tried and true method domestically is you get a tunnel boring machine. And a tunnel boring machine is like a big, expensive machine that you cut a big hole in the ground and you let it go. They're expensive, and they're not really cost effective for short tunnels. You're supposed to use them for tunnels that are 2, 3, 4, 5 miles, sort of that kind of thing. Now, this is a 1 mile long tunnel. Second Avenue Subway Phase 1 and 2, also short tunnels. We did use a TBM for Phase 1, and we're planning to use one for Phase 2. Not something that I think is the best idea. And so the problem is we don't really have a lot of experience with some of those other methods. So places that do, right? So I think, the Spanish have built, people probably know this, in Madrid, the Madrid Miracle. I think it's, 80 kilometers in sort of 2 chunks. They did 4-year periods, 8 years. So it's like 50 miles. South Korea is really interesting. They've built a ton. Obviously, the Chinese have built a ton. There's a lot to learn, I think, there as well. In South America, in Santiago, they're building a ton, really a lot of interesting stuff. We look a lot to Turkey, Istanbul as well, and the Italians in our work. So I think, all those places are doing interesting things. And look, there are tunnel consulting experts from all of those places, fundamentally, that work domestically, and they've not been able to sort of translate, their know-how into better projects here. So I think there's some upstream challenges, whether it be sort of familiarity with some of these techniques at the transit agencies, having just experience building tunnels. One thing that we've come across in research that I thought was very interesting was that sort of like the equivalent of DEP in New York, which they own the water tunnels and sewer tunnels. Those types of agencies have a lot more experience building tunnels than like any transit agency in the U.S. And if we could figure out like a mashup collaboration, I think that would be interesting. But I'm not really aware of anyone doing that kind of cross-government agency work.
I also do want to point out that a lot of times when we are tabling out in a community or just canvassing on the street, one of the most frequent responses, it's not that frequent, but a lot of the time people end up saying, oh yeah, QueensLink, that'll happen in like 100 years. Mm-hmm. And so what I think we're hearing now is that if we don't try, we will never get good at doing this. Right.
Yes.
Are there any other places we should be looking at to build good transit?
I will say, just anecdotally to that, I worked on a project in California that was a big rail project. You could put 2 and 2 together. And I think. And there if it's in your imagination, because it's not here right now. So, but basically, like part of the project was bringing engineers from the Netherlands, and we had to literally like fly them in and like give them apartments and have them help us with rail problems, and then they would fly back and they would keep going back and forth in doing that. And like the brain drain of not having the institutional knowledge to know how to build that is such a problem. Just not even on like a cost basis, but also just like a knowledge state capacity basis. And I was like, this is embarrassing. Like, I'm like, can you help us please? Like, we don't know how to do this. Because like there was no expertise, and they had the expertise in high-speed rail stuff. So like, yeah, it's awkward. High-speed rail. Oh.
No one heard that, right?
Nope,
no one heard that. All right, Jared. I am so sorry to put you on the spot here, but we have a question about what impacts on the service of other lines do you think QueensLink will have?
It's a very great open-ended question. For background in my transportation work, I'm an operations planner. So QueensLink essentially will impact the two lines that it's supposed to connect to, the Rockaway line and the Queens Boulevard line. The Queens Boulevard line would definitely have a big operational impact. It would decide what service that's currently there would say goodbye to Forest Hills and head south to the Rockaways. You would also have to work this into obviously some sort of interlining with the A train and the Rockaway. So it's actually a really funny dynamic when you think about it. A lot of planners now want to promote de-interlining the subway. That's good in some cases, but in cases like QueensLink, that's okay if we interline service. So for operations, you definitely have to figure out the new capacity of Queens Boulevard when you're splitting the line off to QueensLink into the Rockaways, and how that impacts both A service in South Queens and East New York, and also all the Queens service coming out of Jamaica. You have to figure out, do you need more trains, like physical trains? What are the crew impacts? Now you're running, the hypothetical that we've been using is the M train. And the M train, right, if you think about it, weekdays only beyond Essex Street. It's only 8 cars, so there's a capacity restraint using the M. So is that what you would want to do for QueensLink? Do you want to have an alternate service during the off-peak hours? So the beauty of the subway system in New York is that you can have all of these options that a lot of other cities in America don't have. And so I will leave this answer with the fact that it is open-ended, but the primary things to think about are the interlining operations, the crewing, the headways, and also the signal system. I want to assume by this point we'll have CBTC happening on both Queens Boulevard fully and eventually out on Fulton Street in the Rockaways. And that'll help with getting more trains in every hour. So those are the things you have to think about on a base level. I don't want to speak to specifics because we really don't know yet.
Is your train ride going to get better though?
So you mean in any aspect, yeah, because if you're in the Rockaways, now you have both your regular service to Brooklyn and now intra-borough service, the whole goal of getting you north into Queens. It actually also, if you think about it, helps with aviation because you'll now have a service from Kennedy Airport to the LaGuardia Link services. So that helps people that you don't even think about, people who are flight attendants that have to transfer between those terminals, people who are being diverted to a different airport because airlines are allowed to divert to those different city airports without compensation because it's all New York City. So that helps with things you don't even think about. It's not just the beachgoers in the summer or the rush hour commuters, it's the visitors, it's really everyone, and people who work at those airports too.
Woo!
I would also like to point out that we have an incredible student, Franklin, right here. He is doing a capstone at NYU with Professor Goldwyn over here. And you guys are looking at ridership specifically here. So we might have a new report sooner than you think coming out. Yay. Stay tuned. Sorry, do we have any other thoughts on that? Or no? Okay. We're getting to maybe the last 10 minutes, so these will be the final few questions here. So I know we touched on this a little bit before, but I want to bring it up again. So in a lot of our messaging and a lot of the messaging that we put out there, whether that's on social media, in our newsletters, or in the press releases that we hope the press ends up picking up on, we use words like transit equity or phrases like transit equity. So I'm really curious what you guys think. What does transit equity mean in this day and age, especially with the new administration?
Can we omit the last part of that? I think transit equity, though, is a new thing in the history of transit building. I think it's access for different economic groups, for those with varying levels of maybe disabilities, ethnic groups, historically groups or neighborhoods that have not had transit access at its base. I'm not a fully a transit equity type of planner. I'm more operations, so it's been a little bit since I've done the urban planning for it. But those are the, disadvantaged groups, especially having the same opportunity as those who have had those in the past. And I think that honestly, the Rockaway line speaks for itself as a early transit equity project because the Rockaways were so isolated from the rest of the city. So continuing that with QueensLink is also a testament to that history, I think.
I just want to say, as it pertains to our current administration, I think it's even more proof of why we need transit equity. It's not just transit equity doesn't just speak to people that are forgotten. It speaks to people that are actively being oppressed. And one of the things that I didn't when I was first conceiving of the idea of QueensLink, I just looked at past maps. I was like, oh yeah, there's a train line here. You could do a thing. But then when I got especially when we were putting the grant together, we started getting into the history, and it became that much more sort of black and white about it. The Rockaways weren't just cut off; they were planned to be, separated. Robert Moses, who is ultimately the villain, the villain we love to hate here. The irony is that he built that bridge that the A train goes over, but he also demolished half of the peninsula, not just for housing. He demolished it and then never built the housing. And he wanted to demolish more of it and move people out of Bed-Stuy there so he could redevelop Bed-Stuy into the towers and the park type thing. So thank God he never got that far. But the entire history of the Rockaways and the Rockaway Beach Branch is, it begins in 1950 when city planners and Robert Moses had this idea of let's put the people we don't want to deal with off on the edges and redevelop the city in the way that we see fit. And so this line is an absolute legacy of, they didn't use the word equity back then, but it's like a poster child for what transit equity is. There we go. If the current administration is so upset about it, it probably tells you that it's that much more important.
Yeah.
So I think, especially in the current state of everything, transit equity and equity in general is really boils down to asking why we're doing something over and over and over again until you get to all the little nitty-gritties that make a project important. And so you can ask, why do you want to build QueensLink? And it can be a surface level answer. It could be like, oh, we just want to we want to connect to Queens. We want to reactivate this. We want to do that. We want to do this. And then you keep asking why. You go to the next level. You're asked, well, why do you want to do that? Why do you want to connect those communities? Why are those communities disconnected? What brought them to that point? You start going back in history. You start asking those questions. And that is the reality for everything. Like that, every project that we engage with, every project that we are passionate about, that we work on, it's important to ask those questions, especially when we're talking about like urban design, planning, engineering, anything related to like sciences, engineering, STEM, like those questions have been left out for so long. And then you start to live in the reality of, well, who opposes projects like this? And are we asking why? And I think that can open a lot of people's eyes to what we're facing, what we're up against, the challenges that we're going to be facing, especially in the next 4 years. Because if you're not able to understand why we should be connecting communities that have faced so much like disproportionate disadvantage throughout history, what are we doing?
Yeah.
That's the basis of that's the foundation of this. It's asking why.
Woo!
I think one more thing I'll say about equity is, coming from this operations background, is what people also don't realize is when you have a new subway line like this, you create better ways to get around for things that are unplanned or planned. Our lower income communities are on the outskirts of our subway system where it's just that one line and nothing else. So they're prone to unplanned and planned service changes that force no alternative option, especially if it's unplanned or a really slow, crowded shuttle bus operation. Like if I'm someone who lives in Woodhaven off the Jamaica line and I have to get into Manhattan on a weekend and I know that for the next 12 weeks there's just no J train in my neighborhood, I have to get on a bus.
There's none this weekend. There's no J train this weekend.
And yes, there's no J this weekend, the sky is blue, you know. Sorry?
Anyone want to crowd onto a Q109?
Yes, a party.
Yeah, exactly. So even if I have to take a shuttle bus still, I may have to take it 10 minutes instead of 40 minutes to a train into the city. I may have another way from Manhattan to get back to my area if I know there's an issue that occurred earlier in the line. So those are equitable options that don't exist right now without this line. So I think that type of the origin destination OD of people is also something that is enhanced not just for Rockaway people, but people who are impacted by the intersection of QueensLink.
I just want to bring up as well, this is a very kind of tangentially related anecdote, but we had a chance to speak very informally with someone very high up at the MTA. I'm not going to say their name, but if you're in this room, I'm not that good at thinking on the fly, but I will say that if you're in this room, you probably know who it is. And the funny thing is that they said that in a lot of ways, transit is equity. It's not just this buzzword, it is equity. It is a way to help uplift a lot of marginalized communities, not just in the city, but in this nation as a whole.
I will say when we were, one thing that like transit equity or the lack thereof that was highlighted was like during like when we were doing the congestion pricing fight, where a lot of people were rightly like, well, I live in Eastern Queens. Have you tried living in Eastern Queens and trying to get to Manhattan? Have you tried it in Utica? You know, insert all of the places we've been talking about. And, you know, those neighborhoods like deserve great transit. They deserve rapid transit. And I think that's a major issue. And it comes up when you're having these fights about congestion pricing and like, we should have this. And it's like, yes, but we don't have that. Yeah, and they deserve choice, 100%. And it's like one person who I talked to in Eastern Queens was like, it's actually, you have better transit in Nassau County than you do in Eastern Queens. Like you literally hop over. And then when you ask like, why does Eastern Queens not have great transit? It becomes quite apparent, you know, as to the structural issues as to why that happened. And it's a blight on the city for that.
I'm so sorry. We have to wrap up soon, but I have one last question. If everyone could answer this real quick. I think a lot of people here, we're feeling very dejected right now. We're feeling kind of depressed about the current state of things. So I just want to see, what advice would you give to those people who are feeling really down about the state of transit right now?
Every good thing in this world has come because somebody fought for it. So if you're feeling down, use that energy productively. Use that to fight for something that you believe in.
I would say to the people in this room, I would say look around at this room. This is fantastic. This is awesome. And also stay in contact with people that you meet here. Like, I don't know, get an Instagram, get a phone number. But it's really important to show up to things like this, because one of the biggest battles for movements like this and causes like this is getting in-person participation. And this event has shown that it is possible, it's happening, and it's right now. Like, we're here.
Yeah. Last week, I don't know if they're hired again. I don't really know. But last week I spoke to a virtual group of about 200, 300 people who were all fired federal employees, DOT, FTA, insert kind of all the things that, you know, deal with the transit and urban planning community. And all of them, or majority of them, were like, yeah, so I'm going to start running for my local office. I'm going to run for state senate. I know this has been happening a lot with like USAID employees. And I would say, like, if you're pissed, this administration is going to go away at some point. That's all I'll say about that. But this administration will go away at some point, but like the seeds you plant today will not. And so we need, and we've been talking about how long projects take to get built. Like if we start thinking about it in 2028, it'll take us forever. And then also South Coast Rail in Massachusetts is opening next week, which is super exciting. And the Gold Line in Minneapolis is opening. So like there are transit projects that are happening. I do need to just sprinkle some like
Purple Line in DC.
Purple Line in DC. When's that
It was
happening?
in Maryland. So
Oh, okay.
they're working on it.
It's not going to be. It's close.
I think that's their motto.
I was just saying, I was like, is it open? I didn't even know.
Queens, but I go to DC a few times.
Awesome.
Wait, you're running for office? Oh. I missed
I have
that.
too many tweets.
Yeah. No. If you were feeling down, that means number one, you have emotion. Congrats. And that emotion is being charged by your passion. And passion is what helps us beat the people who don't want this, because they don't have passion. They just have
Hate.
hate. Yeah. Where's that old hate videos that what's her name used to do? Yeah, whatever. I digress. Passion is important. It keeps you energized. Even when you're feeling down, it means that something that you want isn't going the direction that you projected, but that's okay. It doesn't mean it's the end or the last stop, for pun intended. So just keep it up, and highlighting what others have said is like being here is part of that passion.
I think most importantly, I think the trajectory actually is quite positive. I think ridership is growing all over the country. Amtrak just announced highest ridership. New York, we're having, post-COVID, of course, our highest ridership in 2024. Seattle's announced new higher ridership. LA, new projects are being built all over the place. People are voting to tax themselves to build stuff. So I think there's a lot of positive there. I do think that this administration is not going to provide federal funding, but I think that means it's up to states to like pick up the mantle. I think here in New York, what's pretty exciting, if you look at the MTA long-term needs plan, if you look at the previous one, there's no subway expansion in it. Right now, there are a bunch of different things that are sort of in the hopper. QueensLink is not, but they looked at it. So my only point is that there's more getting in. And so I think that's all very positive. I also do think that agencies like the MTA, like they want to do better, and they're changing and trying to do better. And so I think that's very encouraging. We did get congestion pricing just not that long ago. It was bumpy, but that is all to like the benefit, hopefully, of transit, especially if you're a bus rider in Manhattan.
We still have to fight for it.
No, of course we do. I'm just saying everyone's like it's gloom and doom, and I'm saying there's another perspective where it's actually, this is a really good moment. There's big expansion projects going around across the country. Some of them are getting scaled back, it's true. But I think, this is probably one of the more fruitful times in transit's sort of contemporary moment, when the public sector has been the sort of mode of delivery. So I think that's all exciting.
What an incredible note to end on here. Thank you all so much. Don't go yet. Hold on. Thank you, Andrew Lynch, aka Vince Schnookenragen. Give him a round of applause. Michael Sampson, aka Schoolhouse Cock. Not the one you think. Hayden Clarkin, aka The Transit Guy. Jared Ice, aka Transit Talks. And last but very much not least, Professor Eric Goldwyn at NYU Marin and for the Transit Cost Project.